Good, good. How's your week been?
Excellent, excellent. I think we're on episode 25 now, so you think we'd get this by now, but talking over each other right at the very beginning of the show there, fantastic. Proper amateur hour.
This is true.
Yeah, no,
well, actually, it was even worse last week because we thought it was episode 23 last week.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I guess we just can't believe that we're 25 in, right, quarter of a century. So I guess that's exciting. But yeah, I had a good week, busy week. Things don't seem to let up at the moment, and kind of locally there's been some kind of more re-energized programs that put in place here and across the kind of Middle East. So I mean that's I think that's positive and kind of moving things in the right direction. How have you been? How's your week been?
Yeah, good. Yeah, same, busy. Yeah, so I mean, actually, was thinking about you last night randomly.
Steady.
And yeah. I mean, like in a kind of sitting in front of a TV kind of way. Yeah, and I think it was kind of thinking and then sort of sympathizing and then understanding. So I thought I'd put Netflix on last night and decided to watch David Letterman's My Next Guest Is. And the episode I decided to watch was Dave Chappelle's episode.
All right.
And he's walking through Dave Chappelle's town in Ohio with a mask on.
Right.
And so, and which made me immediately understand why you don't wear a traditional mask like the rest of us, because his beard is pretty much like yours, right?
Yeah, he's got a solid beard. Yeah, it's solid offering.
But it was incredible the way the mask kind of just looked lost. It was kind of hilarious.
Yeah, it's like a post-it note, walking around with a post-it note. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, I tend to prefer the bandito look with the kind of bandana wrapped around, just to kind of give me that that look that looks a bit more streamlined. But yeah. Well, yeah, for those of you that obviously don't know us and this is your first time either watching or listening on our podcast, welcome to the Growth Show. So as we mentioned there, we're week 25 now, weekly show, kind of different topic conversations where Amit and I kind of bounce around, usually for just an hour. We stretched over that last week by quite a bit, but we'll be back on track today. We have, just as a few more people drop in here, have the ability to kind of answer questions in real time. And obviously, jump on the chat if you've got any questions as well. Send an email to growthshow@digitalnexa.com if you have any questions for us, and always reach out to us on LinkedIn. But I guess actually our tactic changed for today's show based on last week's feedback, right? Because we're kind of, this originally was going to be part 4 of the 2021 series. So we kicked off with kind of sales, marketing, tech and people and how that looks in 2021. And we got a few people kind of contacting us saying, well hold on, that's 4 months away, 3-4 months away. What can we do now, Amit? What can we do now, right? Yeah,
it was interesting because I mean, I guess it just shows what that kind of change is right now. I think being able to look, I think with some businesses anyway, I think being able to look maybe 3 or 4 months ahead of time is perhaps a luxury that they kind of don't have right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's combined with what's going on at the moment. So numbers are kind of increasing everywhere from a COVID standpoint. So there's more restrictions out there for certain businesses. But yeah, it was quite funny when we just started getting comments back saying, look, this is all great, except I kind of need, I don't even know if my business is going to be around in January next year. So let's kind of focus on now. And so we thought we'd kind of dedicate today's show, to that, I guess, right? And quite a different kind of show, because we've not really gone down that kind of tactical, what do you do now route.
No, true.
Yeah, so I think it'll be quite.
Yeah,
good fun.
To be fair, we did actually make a conscious decision. I mean, I think when we first came up with this show, we wanted to be a bit different. We didn't really want it kind of to be like a masterclass of do this, do that. But our audience has spoken, right? So we can't really afford to ignore you. And as you said, I mean, I think today is more about kind of key takeaways, best practices on things that you can do now. And obviously, some of these things you may have already thought of, you may have tried, but I think hopefully you'll be able to kind of pull a few gems out of the show today as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a couple of things here. So, like I said, we've only got maybe just under an hour. So I think we need to maybe just look at kind of B2B and B2C together, Andrew. Obviously, we'll be kind of differentiating different tactics and different approaches as we go along. But I think that, that will allow us to kind of get into some of the areas and some of the kind of, I don't know, ways of doing things in a little bit more detail, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I mean, I think the thing is, depending again on the feedback, we may take a deeper dive in the next coming weeks, either on a B2B space or B2C. But yeah, I think that blended approach is going to kind of be nice. And also, I mean, it's a vast landscape, right? Not only B2B, B2C, but then, okay, different sectors, different industries, different products, service, etc. So we could be on here for the next 10 hours. So far better that we kind of look at a blended approach, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they do overlap. There is overlap, in what you can do as well now. So I think we've kind of had enough of the intros, mate. Should we crack on?
Yeah, I think so. Let's go. So where should we start then?
Yeah, I think understanding who we need to kind of have a conversation with as far as target audience. I think that's probably first and foremost, where you need to start before we kind of have any understanding of who we want to go after. We've got to know who that individual is, right? So I'd say that would be first and foremost kind of understanding your target audience. And we'll talk a bit about existing kind of customers in a bit, but really who is that audience, right? Okay. Where are they geographically located? What do they look like? What's their job title? Kind of really take a dive at that.
Yeah, and I think there's actually you've already raised a couple of interesting points. So I think depending on your business, again, whether it's B2B, B2C, whether it's retail or whatever it looks like, I think certainly from a B2B standpoint, geography now is perhaps less of an issue because we're not restrained to kind of meeting in person, things like that. So perhaps, if you're kind of looking for business right now, is it a case of kind of widening your typical kind of, target areas as such? I think that definitely comes into play.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the other thing which you said was interesting is like, who do these people look like? And again, from B2B standpoint, is your target audience the same, right? So I know in our industry, Andrew, I think we've had these conversations in the last couple of days where it almost feels like entire marketing departments have been kind of wiped out, right?
Yes.
And different people are reaching out to us than would typically be the case. So we would normally target maybe a marketing director or a CMO.
Yeah, definitely.
Whereas today, the kinds of people that are reaching out to us are those who've maybe just let go of their marketing team and are now looking to perhaps even outsource their entire marketing. So again, I'd say kind of pay special attention to that, right? Because if you don't, the people that you may need to pitch to, speak to, or kind of communicate with might be just very different now than what they were 6-7 months ago.
Yeah, 100%. And there may be an audience there, even from a B2C perspective, that just wasn't there before, right? Yeah. So, look at the kind of the explosion of e-commerce, away from not only retail, but other service-based demand industries. A lot of people were not even considering these as an option, but now it's kind of their first port of call. So you may not have even been considering these audiences in the past, and now's the chance to go after some new audiences packs and take the opportunity to perhaps fish in a different pond, right, as it were.
Yeah, and I think there's a challenge with that as well, because I think for many established businesses, we've got brand awareness, people know who we are, people know what we're capable of, people know who we work with perhaps. But suddenly if you've got a new kind of target audience, maybe, you know, the CEO of a company doesn't know who you are, right?
Yeah.
If you were dealing with, I don't know, you know, production, or if you were dealing with marketing or whatever that department looked like before. So you've almost got to kind of think about not necessarily kind of reinventing yourself, but really kind of making it very clear what you do, what value you bring in, and trying to kind of get that message across in the maybe simplest way possible.
Yeah, like what makes you different, right? So, you know, what are you standing out? Why are you engaged in a conversation? As you said, if you're new to that individual, they may be familiar with other organizations that they've worked with before. They know their offering, they know, you know, their positioning, they know the organization, but kind of what makes you different, right? So how are you going to be able to service this client or customer how they perhaps weren't serviced in the past, right? So that again, you know, understanding, yes, who your audience is, but once you're able to identify that, what's the messaging there? What makes you different, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and really kind of just focus on that value point as well, right? You know, what is that value proposition? What is it that you're going to bring in when times are tough for everybody? You know, what difference is your business going to make? You know, in kind of net real terms.
Yeah, I think to be honest with you, that's definitely you know, one of the approaches. I think it's going after how you're going to add value, because people are looking not only at ROI. So I think there is a difference between ROI and value. You know, I think obviously some organizations are just pure ROI driven and saying, okay, well, I give you X, what do I get in return? But from a value perspective as well, it may be, for example, looking at that. Well, what is the benefit of, you know, outsourcing a marketing department or outsourcing a sales department or design versus having something like that in-house? And that's, I think, where that value position kind of comes in as a bit of a stronger play as well.
Yeah. No, cool. And yeah, and I guess after that, it's okay. What's your proposition?
Yeah.
Right. What is it that you're going to offer? You know, we've spoken about sort of value, but what is that actual product? What are those deliverables? Is it a service? You know, what does that kind of look like? I think it needs to be sort of communicated properly.
Yeah, I think in the B2C space, especially, I think, you know, when you say what is that service or what is that product, I think also you need to be looking at what is the offer, right? Because, you know, at the end of the day, you're competing with a whole host of other you know, kind of competitive set. So you do really need to differentiate yourself with some type of offer, okay? And that may be value-based, it may be discount-based, but there does seem to be, you know, a huge driver at the moment, especially in the B2C space, of delivering that offer, you know, and the kind of go-to would be something like an e-commerce, you know, where people are kind of offering first-time purchase discount, return discount. If it's a physical store or a cafe or you know, a bar or anything, it's getting people through the door, getting them to spend some money, and then ultimately kind of getting them to revisit as well. And that may be through a loyalty program, for example. It may be giving them, you know, continued discounts to ensure that they come back and repeat business. So you do need to think about what is that offer, what's that hook, right?
Does it have to be discount based, Andrew, or
no, I don't think it has to be discount based, but I think it has to be either discount or value based, right? So I think in the B2C space, it's an incredibly cutthroat environment. And I think obviously, you know, if we go back to the audience, you're going to get individuals that basically, you know, are broken down differently. So let's say if we talk about a restaurant, for example, we know that hospitality and F&B has been hit particularly hard. There are going to be some individuals that are just discount hunters that, you know, are going to come in, eat and run, or have a drink and run. You know, perhaps you just want to fill your place with that. But I think, you know, the better play is to look at offering some value, but continued value to those individuals. What I've seen in a few outlets is, you know, next purchase, there's a discount on next purchase and next purchase and next purchase to encourage, you know, return visit, right? And through that, ultimately telling people about that offer as well. So it's not necessarily having to discount or slash, but you know, perceived discount or perceived value, I think is just as powerful.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, actually. I think
we see it in the B2B space a bit now, right? I mean, look at Zoom. That, you know, we're talking now on Zoom. I think, you know, to increase their subscriber base, they had they had an offer, right, where you could sign up for a year and they were discounting, correct?
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, look, and I think it works because again, for them, it was more, let's get cash flow in now.
Yeah.
So I think in those kind of cases it worked. But if we look at Zoom, it's the freemium model, right?
Yes.
So we can all talk to each other for 40 minutes or 50 minutes or whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
We went from having, I guess, multiple kind of free accounts inside of a company to a few paid ones, to suddenly now pretty much everyone on a kind of paid account, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We're paying them, hundreds of dollars a month, if not more, right?
Yeah.
But again, it all started from that freemium model. So again, perhaps it's one of those where, you create some stickiness if you have that ability. You have by offering something for free, but for a very kind of limited time period or with some restrictions that are clear. I mean, that's another good point, actually.
Yeah, definitely. Trial access, freemium model. A lot of those, when times are tough and people are looking to save and they don't necessarily want to kind of sign on the dotted line.
Yeah.
If you have the opportunity in your business to offer something, as that hook to get people in and to see your service or your product or whatever, that's a good opportunity for sure.
Yeah. Okay, cool. No, I agree. Andrew, so look, a few of the comments we had last week were very much about that. Again, I just need business today, or I need some leads today.
Yeah.
We had some follow-up conversations which were interesting, but in terms of what people are really kind of looking for, right? And I think the challenge here is that there's no kind of single rule book that everyone follows.
No.
But I think what we both saw in our conversations is that there's definitely kind of elements that people are just missing, or they're kind of overlooking, or they're kind of bypassing, or even perhaps running before they're walking, I guess. And
definitely.
And so should we kind of look at some of those elements? Because I think one of the conversations I had was with B2B. I know one of the ones that you said was a B2C. But I guess whenever we have people that come to us and say, look, actually my challenge is short term, I really kind of need some business through the door, and I need some revenue through. I need some new signed contracts. I know we're both in a kind of habit of asking the same sort of question, right? I'm hoping that our telepathic communication works here and we get it right. But what normally is that question that you ask?
Have you reached out to your existing customers?
Right. Okay.
Right. So I'm hoping that's what
that was it. No, that was exactly it. That was exactly it. But that's the point, right? And how often because I've had maybe 4 or 5 conversations in the last maybe 10 days where I've asked that question.
Yeah.
And only one of those said, we're in the process of doing so. Everyone else was like, no, not really. And what do you find?
I find it astonishing in healthcare. There's not a week that goes past where a clinic or a dental clinic or an orthopedic center or whatever kind of asks that question. And I'm like, well, have you reached out to, how big's your patient database? Oh, we've got about 3,500 patients over the course of the last 5 years. Cool. Okay. When was the last time you actually reached out to them? What do you mean? I was like, well, aside from sending them, a bill after they've come to you, when have you reached out to them or communicated with them about what you're? Oh no, never. And it kind of gets overlooked. There's a lot of focus on acquiring new customers all the time, which is great.
Yeah.
But when you've got somebody, already in your restaurant, like, let's feed them, right? Let's get some food to them, and let's give them perhaps a different offering. So see it a lot where you've got customers, existing customers, or previous customers, right? They're there. This is the opportunity to reach out to them with relatively little cost as well, right? I mean, we've got an opportunity to communicate with them relatively easy. Yeah.
No, and I think that's a point. I think especially when it's kind of data that's yours, the typical cost of kind of engaging with that is always much lower than when you're going out there trying to reach new people, right?
Exactly.
So it makes total sense. All right, so let's look at that then. So how do people kind of reach out to existing contacts, existing databases that are perhaps just sitting there gathering dust?
Yeah. Look, I mean, first and foremost, during the course of the last few weeks, we've spoken about the rise of email and email
Hmm.
communication. And how more people are opening emails, being engaged with emails. People are spending more time in their inbox. It's still the first thing that most of us do in the morning when we get up. Having a coffee, looking through your inbox and kind of communicating there. So I think if you've got any size of database, it doesn't matter, you've got 10, 20, 50, 50,000, look at an opportunity to reach out to those individuals. But more importantly, if you have the opportunity, look at segmenting that data. So not just a kind of blast, be more intelligent in your approach, and look at what's going to resonate with those individuals. Yeah. So I think taking a kind of look at the data you have and the email that you want to send out, think about the creative, think about the messaging. We spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, where it's kind of, the use of emojis, the how long your subject line should be, just take consideration of these things and then start segmenting that data. Okay. And obviously, you can use Constant Contact. I always call it WebMonkey, but it's not WebMonkey. MailChimp. So you've got a kind of opportunity there for low cost as well. Okay.
Yeah.
So low cost, and potentially your organization anyway, depending on the size of it, may have the ability to email straight away, right? So just make sure that you've got your messaging correct and you're segmenting your data, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And I think with email, like what Andrew said, that resurgence is really worth kind of taking note of and testing.
Yeah.
Right. So if you have an engaged database, look, don't send out one email and just say, okay, cool, that didn't work.
Yeah.
Right?
Thanks very much.
This even in terms of email strategy, there needs to be a clear kind of strategy there. There needs to be even potential workflows, and just make sure you're tracking everything, right? See who, I'd say always maybe send out a series of maybe 3, 4, or 5 emails before you start to make any kind of decisions on that. And again, the cost is so negligible that it's just worth doing.
Yeah.
With each of those emails, make sure they're different. Make sure the call to actions are different. Make sure the links contained in those emails are different, and then track everything, right? And see who's opening these emails consistently. See which links they're clicking on, and if you start to see a trend where maybe even 5% of your database are actually opening your emails and clicking and continuously doing so, well, perhaps these are the guys that you just prioritize phone calls to, or your next kind of communication outreach to, right?
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned it there, right? Go old school. Give these guys a call. Reach out to them. I mean, funny enough, what I've seen is people are quite open to have a conversation on phone now. It feels old school, calling people, because obviously most of our time is spent on Zoom or Teams now. I mean, it's moved into the lexicon now, right? I mean, you used to say, oh, you Google things. Now, I mean, you Zoom people, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll Zoom you, right? I mean, it is part of the vocabulary. So go old school, give them a call. I mean, what we actually see as well is WhatsApp. You can use WhatsApp as far as the communication. You have the ability for WhatsApp for Business now. You can send out communication to those, your database from a mobile perspective. If you have not a WhatsApp for Business number, if you have a normal number, you can do broadcast lists, and you can segment those lists out as well. So you can get your message out, across WhatsApp as well.
Yeah, and look, it's weird because in some parts of the world, WhatsApp is still very much kind of, this is personal. This is not really kind of linked to business. That's my, personal phone. In other parts of the world, it's the only way people do business, right? People are making literal, purchasing decisions on the back of a few kind of WhatsApp exchanges. I think the way I'd probably look at this is, if you haven't tried WhatsApp and, you need to have more conversations, start thinking about it. Obviously, maybe try not to, again, I think just be kind of sensitive to who you're reaching out to. Don't be spammy in any way. Maybe make sure there's a pre-existing sort of relationship there. And we've seen some ridiculous success over the last 3 or 4 months for WhatsApp. for certain clients of ours, right? Who now are just saying, look, actually, all we want to focus on are WhatsApp campaigns.
WhatsApp,
right?
Exactly.
And and it's not WhatsApp campaigns in the form of spamming people, but WhatsApp campaigns in the form of running traditional campaigns, but where the call to action is start talking to us on WhatsApp, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's mind blowing how much money's been generated.
You're seeing that more often now in this part of the world where, even on a website, you've got the ability to WhatsApp someone straight away. On social media or on Instagram, you'll see that's my WhatsApp number and Linktree. You can click through straight to me. So there is definitely an encouragement to spark a conversation over WhatsApp. And there's a comfort level, especially in this part of the world, just to engage in a conversation. So as you said, if you haven't, started that yet, look at that. I think this kind of brings us across the social as well. As much as organic is ropey at the best of times, you still have an audience on social that you can engage with. And platforms like LinkedIn, from a B2B perspective, there's great organic reach on there. So look at your kind of Facebook, your Instagram, your Twitter, your kind of space where you have existing fan base, as it were. And start posting on there, start kind of reaching out, start trying to engage with that audience as well, right?
So like personal networks, essentially, right? Whatever your kind of company's network.
Yeah, I think both spaces. So from a company or brand perspective, start to engage with your audience, and then from an individual perspective, start to build out your network as well. And that network may form different. I mean, we see Twitter much more active in kind of US and Europe than here, but obviously large in Saudi Arabia. But here it might be kind of jumping on LinkedIn and getting that messaging across there, and almost from a social perspective, engaging old school. I mean, back in the day, if you was a restaurant or a coffee shop or a retail brand, you'd sit there and you'd comment and you'd engage with other users. Some of that's kind of almost disappeared. So I think stepping back into that, more personalized communication with your kind of fan base, allows you to kind of spark a conversation or remind them of who you are as well.
Yeah. I want to go back to just the database again, Andrew, because I think we missed the point potentially. And I think it's just that general kind of, we did touch upon it, kind of picking up the phone and speaking to people. But I actually almost feel as if there needs to be much more of that, right? In a more kind of aggressive way as well. Because I think while you were talking, I was just thinking, I mean, I think there was a time when I literally probably maybe would answer one phone call in 10, right? Because I knew that people were trying to sell to me. Even though that kind of still happens, I kind of answer every phone call now. So I don't know whether it's kind of, things are just changing because of the reasons you said. But I think to that point, we spoke about kind of intelligent calling, which is, using data, using insights. If someone's opening your emails and things like that, that's all fine. But actually, look, if you've got a database of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, or even more, just think about, getting phone calls happening, right? I've had a couple of conversations in the last couple of weeks where people, obviously said, look, bandwidth's potentially an issue for that. But again, there's other solutions. We had James on the show a few weeks back from Pipeline. And one of the services they offer is, again, just re-engaging kind of old and existing databases, right? Where essentially you can just say, right, here's the database, pass it on to someone else. Here's what we do. Here's what we're looking to offer. And if anyone's kind of really interested in having a chat, pass them back to us. And there's a ton of different ways of doing this, right? But I just wanted to kind of bring that up. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think the thing is, I guess, when we're having these open conversations, there's people at different levels. And obviously, it may be going, okay, yeah, great, Andrew. Amit, I want to give these guys a call, but actually within my organization, I'm not really kind of allowed to, right? It's not really my position. But that's definitely where an organization like Pipeline can step in and say, well, okay, look, we'll represent you, represent your organization. And more importantly, we have the tools and the capability to track the conversations, right? And give you valuable feedback, because that's the other component, right? Just similar to email, and other forms of communication. If you're calling 50 people, 100 people a day, you need to have the ability to know what happened in those calls,
Yeah.
right? And that's not necessarily recording, but it's at least understanding, yeah, spoke to this person, they're interested, they engaged with you, they're a customer of yours 3 years ago, they're happy to come back, right? Or reach out to them with an offer. You know, you're a dental clinic and you kind of give them a call and say, hey, listen, we're offering a deep clean, you know, you're a car detailing company, you know, I'm offering, you know, a free headlight, you know, kind of polish, that kind of thing. So, you know, these are some of the areas where you can just kind of start to pick up the phone and call and see what kind of reaction you get.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. What else can we do with databases, Andrew? So if you've got kind of, you know, a few thousand people and sitting in a database, anywhere else we can kind of use this?
I'd say, just before we get into that, I'd say that we are talking about, you know, databases that people have. There are some options if you don't have data, right? Okay. So I think the thing is that, you know, we've been talking a lot about, okay, I've got customer data, I don't have data. You know, there is still an ability to potentially purchase data as well, right? So there's a lot of, you know, qualified data banks out there that can provide you, you know, valuable data, targeted, you know, by company, job title, etc., back to your target audience at the very beginning there. So you do have an option to do that as well, you know, from there. But yeah, sorry, back to your question. So yeah, I think the other way, obviously, that we can look at engaging with this data is potentially using the social networks and also search to generate lookalike audiences. So for those of you that are unaware, you know, the whole Google network, Facebook, Instagram, you know, Twitter, Snap, etc., has this matching facility. So essentially, if you have a database and you've got mobile numbers, you've got emails, you can upload this to these platforms, the ad platforms. Google, Facebook, Instagram, etc., will match with who they have on their data set, and then they will effectively create lookalike audiences to allow you to target lookalike audiences in the hope that, you know, these people look, operate, behave like Amit online, but I've got 100,000 of them. So I'm going to be able to target 100,000 Amits, which is a pretty scary thought, right? But I can target 100,000 Amits. So that's also another way that you can take this data and potentially leverage your own customer data to acquire new customers.
Yeah, and I guess just going back to that original earlier point, then you can also, so if you wanted to maybe target, I don't know, 50,000 people, but you perhaps had budget to purchase 5,000 records, I guess you could potentially integrate that into the audience expansion strategy as well, right?
100%. Yeah, that's a great point. Okay. Yeah. This gives you a chance to amplify your target audience, right? You know, with relatively little spend, especially across the social networks. Yeah. So yeah, definitely look at this kind of lookalike audiences that you can build out. And ultimately, you know, the goal is to increase conversion rate on the back of those, because those individuals look like your existing customers, right? Yeah. So obviously that's a good opportunity. I mean, and I guess that kind of brings us nicely then onto, you know, these new prospects, right? As far as going after new prospects. So, you know, once you've kind of, you know, beaten your customer, your existing customer database, as it were, you know, and you've been to the point of submission where they're either, yep, okay, cool, thanks very much, Andrew, I'm happy and I want to engage in here, or not for the moment, or whatever, I can make a recommendation. I think one thing that we should just quickly touch on, actually, before, one thing that just popped into my mind is also using your existing customer network to improve your new prospecting network. So looking at some element of a referral program. So it may be, okay, Mr. Customer, I know at the moment you're super happy with our service. You know, you're kind of, you're to the hilt where it comes to our engagement. But is anyone else that you think can benefit from our service, right? You know, and that may be just by way of a kind of casual conversation, or it may be a formalized agreement. So it may be kind of, you know, you offering additional service or additional value to your customer when they start to bring in referral programs. So I think that's actually, you know, something that people should look at as well.
Yeah, and if you're signing up new customers right now, think about putting a clause into your contract that says that as well, right?
Yeah.
So not only is it kind of like, here's a program, but it's already embedded within the contract. It's already essentially set up. And I think, look, referrals is huge. Again, something that's kind of very overlooked, right?
Overlooked completely. Yeah. And you got other people selling your services. That's super powerful, right? If someone turns around and goes, hey, listen, you need to work with Amit over at Nexa, that's huge, right? Versus obviously us reaching out to those individuals straight away. So sorry, back to kind of targeting new prospects then. I mean, where's the kind of first port of call, Amit, for that? It's a billboard, right, on the highway, yeah?
It was in 2005, that's for sure, when we set up. Look, I think really whenever we're talking about targeting new prospects, we've got to look at the low-hanging fruit first.
Yeah.
We've got to look at intent. So again, if we look at B2B, B2C, B2B or kind of high ticket sort of luxury B2C might have a longer lead time. But there's a ton of businesses out there where someone's just searching for a service or a product right now, right?
Yeah.
And typically when they're searching for a product or service, I think there's two places they go to now. One is obviously Google, right?
Yeah.
And the other is Facebook groups potentially, right? Social media.
Mm-hmm.
And I think these are the places now where people are, they've got an immediate requirement, an immediate need. They don't want to necessarily take a risk. They're going to go to the search engines to see, which companies are near the top of Google or at the top of Google in terms of a search results page. Or they're going to go to social media where potentially, they're going to get introduced to people maybe on the back of a referral as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, that, as you said, Google is definitely still point of call. You Google it, I want this, I want that. Product or service. And again, some of it is an immediate requirement, some may be from a research purpose, but you still have a requirement, right? You don't randomly search, obviously, for products and services unless you have an intent to purchase at some point down the road. And yeah, from a social perspective, there is that recommendation. One thing I would say from a B2B perspective is people do ask the same questions on LinkedIn. So you get a lot of people that go on LinkedIn and reach out to their network and wider network and say, hey, I'm looking for X, or, I'm looking for a consultancy firm that does Y, or whatever. So I think, yes, Facebook groups, there is a lot of B2B and B2C in that way. There's these closed groups or closed communities that say, hey, listen, where can I get my car fixed, for example, right? And then personal recommendations are laced in. But I think that also happens on LinkedIn. So on LinkedIn, people do ask the question, where's a good web company, for example, more professional services. There's definitely that on there as well. So I'd say that, yeah, the split between the two. And then look, when it comes to, I think B2C, there's probably a case to argue for, social as well, Instagram. So people kind of looking on Instagram around travel, cafes, restaurants, etc. People do use the search functionality. They do use hashtags to discover new things. But I mean, we can get into that in a bit. But I mean, from a Google campaign, then. So let's look at that search. What can I do then? So what can I do to kind of make sure I'm visible, or I'm even there, right? To make sure I'm even there.
Yeah, look, visibility I think is key. I think we've spoken about Zero Moment of Truth on this show. Yeah, maybe one of the early shows, right? And with the Zero Moment of Truth study by Google, basically all the data just suggested that people today will be, maybe 70 or 80% of the way through their purchasing decision before they make themselves visible to a company, right, or a service provider.
Yeah.
And so if they're going on Google or if they're looking on social media, I think the main part of all of this is that a company's got to be visible to even be in sort of consideration, for whatever that requirement is. So the key, I think, is visibility. So, from a search perspective, possibly more so. And the reason being that, if they can't find you in the search results, then there's a really good chance that you're not going to be in that short list of 3 or 5 vendors or companies or retailers that they possibly buy from. Um, so how to get that visibility? Well, Google Ads is probably the quickest way. And again,
Yeah.
it's very easy to get lost in Google Ads. So if you're working with someone that knows what they're doing, you can save money and actually generate pretty good ROI on the back of it. And then from a kind of social perspective, I don't know, I guess it's, again, just being visible, right? I mean, I always feel as if, I'd love to study this at some point, but the kind of, out of sight, out of mind aspects of social media. And I'll give you an idea. When we probably had a little bit more time on our hands, both of us were a lot more active on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And we were getting a lot of referrals, but we were getting referrals from people that we've never worked with. I mean, this was a crazy thing, right? So people who had just seen us, seen our content, seen, just seen what we kind of talk about, understood our mindset a little bit. Were then just referring us to others, saying, look, you've got to work with Nexa because of, A, B, and C. And we, when we get these referrals in, we're obviously very thankful, but we go back and look in the CRM and say, look, who is this person? Like, have we ever worked with them? Never worked with that company, never worked with that person. But that, I think there's definitely some correlation with that, So in terms of if you're visible as a person, if you're visible as a company, I think you get more kind of opportunities from that aspect as well, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think, going back to search there, the amount of times where I sat with someone and said, well, let's just do a search, for your product, and they're not there. And they were like, well, that's not my competitor. They're a small little shop. These guys are so small. I'm like, well, I don't know that. I'm sitting at home. I'm sitting on my MacBook typing. I've got no clue about your industry, right? I just know what I want. So, you need to be visible. And obviously, look, 3 hours a day pre-COVID, that was what the time people were spending on social media, right? So that's all about eyeballs, and guaranteed that kind of social time has increased. So you need to make sure that you're present and you're visible on there. So, from a social perspective, obviously it's looking at campaigns as well. So if we're looking from search, it may be those Google AdWords, as we mentioned. YouTube has something called YouTube for Action, which is based on Google search. So basically, showing videos based on what people have searched in there. So that again is a lead gen kind of play. We want to possibly be thinking about an always on campaign. So again, you're always visible. And I think in the social sphere, it's just about amplifying some of that content, right? If you've got good quality content, good message, good offer, use the social platform, because people are spending a vast amount of time on there, right? I mean, one of the things that we do on social is obviously that kind of retargeting. So, if you've run some ads on Google, driven people to a landing page or your website, when they go back out across social, make sure that you kind of retarget to them across those social channels. And we've seen tremendous success for lead generation programs on social media as well. Look, and I think when we look at social media specifically, there still is an opportunity to get some reach without spend. Okay. So, you've got, LinkedIn, we touched upon about organic reach, and we know, not only ourselves, but we have good friends, colleagues, etc., that get tremendous reach on LinkedIn, right? People that have changed their whole structure and their whole organizational engagement on LinkedIn because the reach is so vast, without spending a dime. Similarly, if you look at a platform like TikTok, there's insane, ridiculous reach. If you're not familiar with kind of Ocean Spray and Dogface, who did a kind of collab with Fleetwood Mac. I mean, Ocean Spray, the cranberry drink, ended up giving him a truck, giving life supply of Ocean Spray. He's now engaged with a whole host of other advertisers in the US, all on the back of just producing content, right? Got a longboard, did a Fleetwood Mac video, and kind of went crazy viral, right? TikTok still has that capability. And look, as TikTok starts to roll out their ad platform, we've seen it in the last week. We ran a campaign for a hotel here, and the hotel rang us and said, what's happened? Why? Well, the phone's ringing off the hook. We're getting bookings not only for brunch, which was publicized, we're getting hotel bookings. We moved the needle on their occupancy. So I think it's one of those platforms that is continuing to grow at a rapid rate. And it's not just for kids. Yeah. TikTok isn't just for kids. The lion's share of people, especially in the Middle East, actually across the world, is kind of that, 18 to 35, right? That kind of sweet spot. People with money. So yeah, I'd say from a social perspective, those stand out. And then obviously, depending on what you're involved in, B2C, B2B, you've still got Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snap, right? All of these platforms have organic reach to some capacity, but obviously they all have ad platforms that you're able to target individuals, your target audience on as well. Yeah.
Andrew, you mentioned influencers earlier, right? With the Ocean Space. So again, how viable is that for businesses, whether it's B2B, B2C, to engage with influencers? Again, let's look short term. People have got a pain point now. They want leads, they want business now. Influencers is a good way to go.
Yeah. I mean, look, influencers, they're still, let's look at B2C. So from a B2C perspective, that's probably the most well known. There's still an opportunity to collaborate with the right influencer. They can deliver your message to a new audience. And there is mechanisms, obviously, to track the effectiveness of it. So I think more influencers are opening up to the opportunity now of kind of collaboration as opposed to just flat fee. So I think, have a discussion with influencers once you've, identified a few that you think, and obviously that breaks down to the macro stuff, which you may not be able to want to engage with, but then nano and micro as well. I think from a B2B perspective, it's still early days. There's one of the campaigns that was in the US pre-COVID was with Caterpillar. So that kind of heavy machinery, and Mike Rowe, a guy that used to have a show on Discovery Channel and DIY Network, where he was collaborating and kind of using that mini celebrity status to kind of get that brand association as well. So there still is a great opportunity. The other thing I'd look at though is kind of content creators and collaborators. So not necessarily just an influencer. You're talking about individuals that really work hard to create beautiful content, right? Okay. So looking at working with them, not just to promote a product or service, but potentially create something for you as well, right? To take it one step further.
But that's really interesting, because I think the challenge, and I guess there's people out there who are listening going, look, great, I'd love to post on LinkedIn, and I'd love to run social campaigns and all sorts of things like that, but you need content for that, right? And so I guess working with the right influencers will kind of help solve some of that process, I guess, right? In terms of creating content that you can then repurpose and use elsewhere.
Look, okay. I mean, I think the thing is that there are content creators out there, right, that will help collaborate with you. And I think the thing is, you've brought up a good point about content. So as much as we may want to aspire to communicate with existing customers, go after new prospects, that's like part of the story, right? You can't go to market without content, right? I think the thing is though that what's changing is there almost was this thought that content had to be kind of premium, it had to be super high quality, super professional. And what we're finding is content just has to be valuable and real, right? So it doesn't have to, have high production value necessarily. When we go back to the kind of dog face one with Ocean Spray, guy filmed it on his phone, right? I think the thing is the tools have changed, right? It's not a 30-second clip on a Nokia phone anymore, right? Which is super grainy and you don't know what's going on. Most of the phones that we have now can shoot in 4K. There is apps that allow you to produce videos within literally 10 minutes. There's apps with apply filters that allow you to create beautiful imagery on the back of some shoddy photographs, right? Let's be honest. So I think the thing is, you've got now the tools available to you to create. And look, we are seeing, as crazy as this may sound to our audience, or if you're listening, there's a lot of enterprise companies that are now reaching out to content collaborators that are looking at on-demand networks to produce content for them. Famously, I kind of I had a meeting in London with a huge UK company, and I was blown away that all of their content was created through a series of freelancer networks. That was it. So it's just a whole network of freelancers. They didn't work with agencies. They basically had in-house strategy, and then their whole influence was through freelancers. So, you know, I think there's still good quality, high quality, or, you know, high quality content, again, as much as is valuable, informative, all of these things, right?
Yeah. No, it makes sense. What about for B2B companies though? I mean, so again, you know, maybe TikTok and platforms like that aren't relevant, but perhaps, you know, let's kind of go back to that content piece related to this. You know, what is it that B2B companies can be producing in terms of content to try and engage audiences, to try and stay visible? I guess these are the kind of main objectives.
Yeah, I think from B2B. So first of all, I'd still say that social media is still, like TikTok and stuff, is still valuable for B2B because it's about eyeballs, right? So, you know, it's still about eyeballs. So people are still spending 3+ hours on social media. So as long as you've engaged with that individual at some point somewhere else, and you're retargeting them and you're kind of messaging them, I think you should still use it. I think that type of content, I think first and foremost, what we look at is, you know, reusable content and repurposed content. So what do you have now that may be a brochure or a guide or a video? How can you repurpose that? How can you re-energize it, right? You know, so it's not necessarily going out, budgets are tight at the moment, and creating new, fresh content. It's reimagining content and re-energizing it, right? So I think that's you know, one that can be done. And also just, you know, when it comes to things like LinkedIn and stuff, I've found, you know, that even just, I bought a small tripod with a small light for less than 100 dirhams. You know, and the videos that I've been creating and putting out on LinkedIn, I've got far higher engagement than anything else I put out, right? So again, as long as you're offering value to the audience, I don't think the consideration is anymore that, you know, is this an insane premium offering? Is it just real? Does it speak to me? Does it answer a question that I may have? And that's what's more important, I'd say.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. I mean, yeah, it's funny because again, we've had conversations in the last few months where people have said, look, I want something that's really kind of high production. I want people to kind of really see how, you know, really kind of want this product to stand out or this service to stand out. And you kind of look at it going, well, it just looks fake at that point, right? And if it doesn't look genuine, I think people are kind of really well trained now where they can see through things like that. So I think to your point about, you know, keeping things realistic, keeping things relatable, I think that has a lot of value. And I think especially right now, you know, especially, you know, in the kind of age we're in, you know, with what's going on around us, you know, I think people just want to be able to relate to other companies or to other people, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's relatability, right? So, and that doesn't mean you diminish your product offering, you diminish your brand values or your brand messaging. It just means that the communication is different. And again, it goes back to value.
Yeah, and then look from a content perspective, in terms of the other things that people should be looking at, the blog articles, you know, the value of having a really good blog is immense. I think as a kind of traffic driver, but also a qualifier of traffic. So, you know, certainly think about that. Andrew, you obviously mentioned kind of converting maybe brochures into downloadable guides. I think that makes a lot of sense. Look, things like this, webinars, podcasts, or do what me and Andrew have done and cheated, which is basically turn our webinar and basically use your audio file and turn it into a podcast, right? But that podcast is getting like literally hundreds of people listening to it every week, right? And it's and again, you know, there's again quite cost effective. This is the cost of essentially a Zoom webinar license that allows us to do this. You know, there's a lot of kind of easier ways to create content now than there ever has been. So definitely kind of think about that, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think that it's just about being open. Yeah. So just open your kind of mind, open your eyes and think, well, okay, if I've got, for example, you know, this webinar, what can I do? Now we've spoken about chopping this up to like a 10-minute highlight show, you know, doing a show reel, all of these different behind the scenes. There's a whole host of other ideas that we've got. It just so happens the first one we've done is, take the audio file, put an intro and outro, and then get it up on kind of Anchor and get it distributed, right? As you said, we've now getting great encouragement off the back of that. But I guess, you know, all of this, and just as we've got, just because we want to keep it tight today, as this kind of rolls into, well, we've done all of this, you know, and I think this is kind of half the story, right? I think getting the interest, generating buzz, getting people, you know, driving people to whatever a website is okay. We're now stepping into that sales process. Now we have a challenge, obviously, right? Because we can't go into individual sales process, individual, you know, activities. So I guess, you know, I think what we should probably roll through now is like best practice, right? So you've got somebody, you've engaged with them. I mean, you know, perhaps we cap this off with best practice, right?
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, go on. So I mean, like in terms of, again, this is some of the challenges that we see where people say, look, I'm running campaigns of getting people sort of engaging with us, but then it's not really going much further. And it's funny, you know, we kind of say, okay, well, what have you done, right? This person's shown some interest. What have you done? Well, I tried to, you know, phone them. Okay, cool. How many times? Well, once. Did I pick up? No. What did you do after that? Oh, I sent them an email. And okay, was a response? No. Okay, well, what next? And they're like, well, that's it, right? They're not interested. And I think part of that challenge is, well, no, hold on. Let's use the technology that exists. You know, firstly, I mean, I don't call anyone back. I don't know the last time you called somebody back. You don't even call me back, Andrew, sometimes. So,
amazing.
So, I mean, like, again, try if someone doesn't pick up, try again. If someone doesn't reply to an email, send another email. If they ignore everything, send a WhatsApp, right? I mean, from a social perspective, check your inboxes, all that kind of stuff, I guess, Andrew. Yeah, that's what I guess.
It's crazy. I think, you know, are you reachable, right? Are you contactable? That's what's crazy. You know, the thing that amazes, I think, us all the time is the fact that you're driving campaigns, you're driving people somewhere, and, you know, there's just a form fill, there's just a phone number, or, you know, I mean, give people the option to communicate with you on social media, drop an email in there, make sure you got a business account, put in your WhatsApp number, you know, check your DMs. Like you said, you need to make sure that, you know, you're doing that. Now, in all honesty, and this kind of brings us on to the next point of best practice, your response time, you know, and follow-ups, right? Kind of be that first to respond, that first to follow up. Most of this now can be automated. Yeah. So from a WhatsApp for Business perspective, from all of your inbox DMs, from your email, from your form fill, you know, as soon as someone fills in that information or communicates with you, you can set up triggers. So you can set a trigger saying, thanks very much for reaching out. I'll be with you in X, right? A day or 2 hours or an hour or whatever. And you can set up alerts on the back of that. So from a response time perspective, you can automate this process, right? So you really need to, there's no excuse. I guess that's what I'm saying. You know, there shouldn't be an excuse to at least try and communicate and reach out to those individuals, right?
No, I mean, exactly. And Andrew, the first to respond point, I think, is really important.
Yeah.
Right, because, you know, again, being accessible, you know, the thing is, if somebody fills out a form on your website or you know, touches base with you on LinkedIn, they're not in a meeting right now, right? They're not on another call. These guys are available. They're in that moment. They're in the zone. Yeah. And it's mind-boggling how many people are like, well, I'll give them a call tomorrow. We don't like to phone them straight away. Why? Why would you not want to try and phone them straight away? They're interested. Exactly. They're interested in whatever you've got to offer. Pick up the damn phone and call them straight away. Because if you don't, there's a good chance that they're also contacting 3-4 others.
100%.
Right?
100%.
And typically, again, you know, there's a lot of data out there regarding this, but the company that picks up the phone first or kind of, you know, responds the quickest, they stand a much better chance of winning the business than the company who responds last, right? I mean, that's just fact. We don't even have to look at data for that, you know. Right. So again, just make sure you've got those kind of processes in place where you know, you're instantly receiving these notifications that people are interested or they want to engage, And if it's not your job inside of your organization, make sure whoever's job it is accountable for that, right? Make sure they're being tracked on how long they are taking to respond to a lead. Because the second they are being tracked, to guarantee they're going to get much faster and better, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's the thing. It really is. I think that's 100%. So look, I mean, we've obviously at that point when you've got that communication, next I guess is your messaging, right? As far as kind of why you, right? We spoke about this at the kind of top of the hour, but why you? You may be reaching out to someone and they're communicating at that point. So what is that, right? Is that how your proposal looks? Is it the availability of your product or service? Is it price? I mean, this is kind of what you need to focus on next, right?
Yeah. So what would you advise, Andrew?
Yeah, amazing. That's great. I was going to throw it to you, but that's fine. So look, I think the thing is that you need to be looking at, these key factors here. So first and foremost, you need to communicate effectively why you, right? So whatever that case may be, I think obviously from a B2B perspective, most of it is driven through proposals. If it is from a B2C perspective, it may be customer experience, it may be recommendations, it may be referrals, or it might just be testimonials, right? So I think these are the things that are crucial to people from a best practice perspective, that really kind of draw people in, right? I've seen that you're working with someone else. I know this company that you're working with. These customers are happy, this, and this. And I think these are all big drivers.
Yeah, okay, totally agree. I think let's look at maybe two of those, and then think about how people can use those in that process. So let's say case studies and testimonials. Two very kind of separate things, and two things that have a very different role during that sales process, right?
Yeah.
So if we look at case studies, for example, case studies shows essentially that you can do what you're saying you can do, right?
Yeah.
Or you can do what you're saying you can, whatever you're proposing. And then from a testimonial standpoint, that's someone saying, look, not only did they do what they said they were going to do, but they did it really well, but I'm happy to kind of, say, well done, right, publicly.
Yeah.
And the way that you can use this, the way that you can kind of integrate this is in so many different ways. So, for example, even as simple as nurturing emails. So when you're talking to someone, maybe they're at at proposal stage, you're sharing case studies, but there's always a time lag between proposal and sign off. And that time period is, and that kind of period of time, is very important, right? And if you can kind of, maybe 2 days after, someone's opened or looked at your proposal, send them another email saying, hey, how's it going? Just wanted to follow up. And by the way, here's a few sort of testimonials from companies that we've worked with recently. That's going to make you stand out, right? That, what you're trying to do is kind of enhance that trust and credibility that you've already built with that client. And you're going to try and do that in a very kind of timely way, right? Sometimes it's not worth showing people testimonials top of funnel, right? Because they're not at that stage. They don't really care at that point.
Yeah.
What they care at that point is, can these guys do what I need them to do? Do they offer that service?
Yeah.
Right. But when they're choosing between you and someone else, that's where those testimonials can really kind of play a part. So think about when you use that type of content, at which stage of your funnel that you use it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, wholeheartedly agree. And look, we could spend a whole show talking about tech, right? And what you can use to do that. I think the thing is, honestly, in this space, Google is your friend. So, get on there, Google, look at trackable proposals, trackable content, all of these things, right? These all kind of help you, build out communication. You can, even silly things, within Gmail, you can schedule emails, right? You can schedule emails that go out in the morning, so they're top of that person's inbox, right? All of these things, genuinely, Google is your friend. So don't think that it's not out there. It is, right? The fact that you get that email at 8:07 in the morning, most likely that individual sent it the night before, especially in my case. So yeah, I guess so. Just because I think we've crossed the hour, Amit, I guess, the kind of wrap up piece here really is really retention, right? So it's not only about reaching out to existing customers, it's not only about acquiring new customers, but at the moment, we've got to make sure that we retain everyone that's in a relationship with us, right? That's kind of a key focus. So kind of where are some of the areas that we can make sure that we're retaining those customers?
Yeah, look, I think there's different tools and things that you can use, but really it just comes down to really good customer onboarding, really good customer service, being able to deliver on what you said you'd be able to deliver on, exceeding the expectations. But the thing about retention is it goes back full circle, Andrew. So where we started the show was, let's look at existing clients, let's look at existing databases, right?
Yeah.
And it's literally a full circle where if you are getting, if you are retaining a lot of clients, they're happy, they're satisfied. These are the people where you start, right? Because they're the ones who are most likely to spend more money with you, and they're the ones who are more likely to open more doors for you, right?
Exactly.
And so that whole kind of process just goes full circle, and I think that's such a key point.
Yeah.
Understanding things like customer satisfaction and things like that. There's customer feedback tools. We're huge believers in Net Promoter Survey scoring. So every client we sign on gets a NPS survey periodically. Why? Because if we can sense some level of dissatisfaction, we can fix it before the end of a contract, way before the end of a contract. Maybe someone's been onboarded, not so great. But it allows us to kind of investigate that. But what it also allows us to do is those people who are very highly satisfied in scoring us a 10 allows us to, hey, go to them and say, right, do you mind, giving us a testimonial? Do you mind putting a review up? And whatever it looks like, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's done tactically where, every score has a different meaning and a different consequence on the back of it, and a different action on the back of it.
I think what I'm hearing as well more and more often now is accessibility to either company ownership or higher management, right? That kind of at least visibility of those individuals, or even controlled access, as in like, hey, listen, I want to speak to X or speak to Y. I think that's a big part of retention as well, right? We're kind of definitely moving away from a faceless corporate world. I think the more that socially we are distanced, people want to connect even more. And that definitely is a huge part now. I see that there's definite accessibility.
Look, do you know what? It's a good point, because again, we spoke at the beginning of the show about people cutting marketing departments and different departments and that. What we're seeing actually is decision makers at the top of a hierarchy, speaking to people that they typically wouldn't speak to, right? And I think what's happening is kind of tall hierarchies are now being sort of flattened. And that's such, and again, that's it. Again, I think that's where that accessibility point comes into play a lot.
Yeah.
And perhaps it's more relevant now than it was, again, a year ago, right?
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. Cool. Look, I think we've crossed the hour. We tried not to, but we have. I think that wraps it up in a neat bow. Look, it's always challenging, I think, Amit, with trying to squeeze in an hour of what can I do now. I'd hope that there's some gems there that we've managed to lace, and just even spark some discussion, right? Or spark some debate around what you're doing inside your organization. This is the whole idea of the show, right? To kind of bounce around those ideas. And as we said, we definitely, kind of answered the cry where people were saying, well, no, what can I do now? So I think even if you manage to kind of pull some of those thoughts and apply them to your organization, we'd hope that some of those would hit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, throwing it out there, if any of you guys are really kind of genuinely struggling right now, or aren't sure where to start, just feel free to reach out to either Andrew or myself.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, no obligation. I mean, just more than happy to just have a chat and see if we can kind of point you in the right direction.
Definitely.
I think we'd be more than happy to do that.
And that brings us nicely to kind of communicate with us. So you can find myself and Amit on LinkedIn. Just give us a search, and obviously you can email growthshow@digitalnexa.com. Throw it out there. Go and have a look at our YouTube channel. Give us a subscribe. Have a subscribe to our podcast as well, guys. As always, really enjoy kind of doing this show for you guys. Honestly, it's I think both Amit and I look forward to this every week. So even if we've had a particularly taxing or troublesome week, this is kind of a breath of fresh air. So thank you again for listening. And I guess that brings us to the end. Amit, any wise wisdom or bit of pearls there to end on?
No, not really. I just think people, I think it's really kind of time to get quite tactical. So yep. I don't know. Just again, conversation I'm having is think about your end result and work backwards, as opposed to just thinking, look, we'll launch some campaigns and see what happens. I think now's not the time really to experiment too much. The beauty of digital is that you can experiment, change things quickly, not lose any money. I mean, it's just treat it for what it is, and I think if people kind of get smarter with tactics and marketing, the results will be there.
Perfect. That's good, because I threw you there. I definitely hadn't planned to ask you that question, so I quite like that answer. All right, guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And we'll see you next week, guys. Thanks, Amit.
Thanks. Take care, Andrew.
Bye. See you later.